afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming to today's program. I think it's really exciting. I hope you enjoy our panelist discussion. Thank you all for coming. My name is Bob Lawless. I'm the chair of the Joint Program Planning Committee for the Hopewell Valley Historical Society. The Society, in conjunction with the Hopewell Museum, has put this program together. We did one similar last year for the library, different topic, but it was very, very well received. I want to thank everybody for their efforts putting this all together. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it because this is important to the community. If any of you are interested, the Historical Society is always welcoming new members. Great opportunities. If there's something you'd like to share with us, we would welcome that. There's a lot of history in the township, in the community, that we're not aware of. So if you think you've got something that might be beneficial to us and want to share that with the community, we would truly appreciate that. We have some refreshments on the side if you'd like to welcome yourself to that. And with that, I will introduce Bob Worsnack from Hopewell Museum.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Bob Worsnack, and I'm the first vice president of the Hopewell Valley Historical Society and a trustee with the Hopewell Museum. And I also volunteer on the program committee as well with Bob. I'm glad to be working with both organizations and to be able to create and present some wonderful programs for the public. I would like to let you know that the museum is looking forward to getting our renovation project underway very soon. We look forward to being able to bring people back in for tours, and we thank you for your patience. We also thank you for those of you who were able to attend our holiday tea open house in December. That's where we were able to showcase some of the things that are happening behind the scenes at the museum. And now I'm very excited to welcome you to our joint program today. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for today's program, Catherine Fulmer-Hogan. Kat is the current president. Kat is the current president of the Stoutsburg Sourland African American Museum, or SSAAM, and a board member of the Hopewell Museum, and the founder and chair of the Hopewell Valley Heritage Week. Welcome, Kat.
So Bob left something important off when he talked about all the things that he does. He's also my road dog. People don't know this. Back when we had in-person meetings, Bob and I carpooled every time to Hopewell Museum because we're neighbors. And he just barely tolerates me. And all my nicknames. I can't take this off because it's now stuck in my earring. That's what happens when you wear big earrings. So before we get started, I just really want to share, I think it's important, particularly given the topic, that we share the land acknowledgement that's posted on the site of the Hopewell Museum. The Hopewell Museum and this building are located on the ancestral homeland of the Lenni Lenape. Settled on by Europeans and enslaved Africans in the 1690s, our organization is committed to preserving the stories and cultures of all past residents of these lands. So welcome. I'm so excited that all of you are here for this amazing program. Most of the folks seated to my left have known me probably for the entirety of my life. That's such a privilege and honor for me. They are members of families who were integral in the creation of community in Hopewell Valley, and quite frankly, often unrecognized. And so this is an opportunity for us to put forth their stories. They are part of the fabric of this community. They are part of what makes Hopewell Valley great, and they're incredibly entertaining. So I cannot wait for you all to behold what's going to happen here. So the first individual on my left is Evelyn Brooks, known as Nana to nearly everyone, and she's my Nana. She'll be 102. Yes, okay. 102 on February 27th. And she is a member of the Brooks family. And our homestead, our original homestead, was on the Sourland Mountain, on Mountain Church Road, and our family moved there in the 1940s. Oh, you hear that? 1948. She's sharp as a she's going to correct me like through this whole thing. So I'm used to it. I'm used to it. It's fine. Next to her is Ronald Clark. We call him Mr. Ronnie. He's very special to our family. Ron is part of the Clark family. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force, and his family lived on Dublin Road, just across the street there, since like around the turn of the century. Next, and I'm kind of going to do them jointly because they're sisters. Next to Mr. Ronnie are Angie and Susan Witcher, or Angela and Susan Witcher. They are members of both the Witcher and Nebius family. Nebius family predominantly in Hopewell Borough, but the Witcher family resided both in Pennington Borough and also up on the Sourland Mountain on Wirtsville Road. As Grovers, see? They're all a wealth of knowledge. They also, in honor of their father's incredible memory, they care for the Pennington African Cemetery. Angela serves as the president of that board, and Susan is also a member of the Board of Trustees. So we're incredibly grateful to have all of them here with us. And to start things off, I'm going to, listen, this is going to be very organic. We do have questions, but I have learned that these folks have a lot to say, and we need to hold space for that. So, I already shared what local families you're a part of and where in Hopewell Valley. So I think the first thing I'm going to ask you all, is what are some of the ways that you have committed to sharing and preserving your stories and the stories of your ancestors? And we're going to start with Nana, if that's okay. If that's okay with you, Nana.
All right, here we go. How am I sharing? Well, the first thing I did, I had 10 children. And sharing with them was, to me, telling them about life. And fortunately, I love history, and so history was really a part of our time. And so with that, with having the children and then their children, and so I was fortunate enough to have a granddaughter named Kathy who really, really, really likes history, and so she's the one that's recording our family history.
On my part, our family, we all saw the series Roots years ago, and our family decided that we would go down to our origins in Virginia and look up our roots. So a couple of my aunts and my father went first, and then I went, and my brother and my father for a second trip. But we found out a lot of people down in Virginia didn't know that they were related to each other. And it was us northern Clarks that went down there and informed them and showed them how they were related. And it was truly a spiritual experience for me. I'm so sorry we didn't journal it so that we could share it with with our offspring, but we failed to do that.
It's not too late. Not too late.
I guess I would say in so many ways, basically through just talking and sharing information, particularly as we think of it. I think sharing history is very organic, as Kathy mentioned. Something will happen and it'll remind you of something that took place in the past, and you share it with other people, particularly your kids, and it goes on. I thought it was very interesting how Mother Brooks said 1948. Well, I got taught about 1948 as well. That was the year that our parents married. And they moved into the house that Brooks was staying in, and then that's quite like that. So yes, 1948.
Oh boy. So I don't know if most of you knew our dad, Albert Witcher. He was quite the talker. So
Yes.
I take a little bit from that, and. He was a big fan of being able to let people know about their family history. And he seemed to have a very sharp memory for being able to do that. And because there were many more black people of color in Pennington, Hopewell than they are now, but they were very much connected, and he was able to share a lot of the stories, and he loved to tell stories, as Beth, I'm sure, can attest. And through those stories, we learned a lot about how the family came to be and settle and stay, and that type of thing. And I think that's what really kept the history going, is the stories. And so we're always very grateful for those stories, whether they're recorded or oral. But a lot of our family, as in many families, especially, if you come from another country, come over here, you bring your stories.
The patriarchs of every family represented here, where they were the salt of the earth. They were some of the best people that I have ever had the pleasure of encountering in my lifetime, and it was just a privilege and an honor to really know all of them. I am curious, and I'm sure everyone here is curious. Did you, or I already know the answer, but I feel weird asking, but did you or any of your family attend our local schools? And which schools? So this is like a multifaceted thing. And what was that experience like? And I think this time I'm going to start with Susan.
Oh boy. Well, yes, I did attend elementary school in Hopewell because I was raised up on the mountain on Wardsville Road across from Hillbilly Hall. My grandparents lived in Pennington Borough, my father's parents. So I came to the Pennington schools 5th grade. And then in 6th and 7th grade, and it kind of, I have to say, kind of kicked off my feeling for the rest of the school. I did go through high school here. I did graduate in 68. But in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they had a system, a classified system. And it started 6th grade, it was 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D, 6E, 6F. Oh yeah, I was 6F. Okay. 7th grade, 7A, 7B, 7C, same thing. And they printed it in the newspaper. They printed your teacher, they printed who was in your class, and what classification you would be in. So it kind of left me feeling a little whatever. And in high school, it was good. Went through high school. It was fine. Graduated in 68. There was only 4 of us, so it wasn't like a big dating opportunity. They were all women, and that's about. There was 4 of us. that was about it. But yes, I did end up graduating in 68. Things were very different back then but that's the way it was. And that classification kind of stuff. Turn it to you.
Thank goodness they got rid of that. So I was class of 1980, just positioning myself in history. So I went to Hopewell Elementary School. I really enjoyed it. I really liked Hopewell Elementary School. I had some good teachers, and it was really a great foundation. Then I went to Timberlane, and that was awful. I'm sorry. We're just being honest. I was bullied. I do saying this also for any high school students or middle school students that might be in this room. Don't be ashamed if you're bullied. A lot of people are bullied, and we get through it. We get past it, and we move on. There's so much more tools to help kids now than there were back in the 70s. So, you know, just talk to your teachers, talk to your counselors. You can get through it. Went to high school, and it was definitely better. Everyone matures a little bit by the time they get to high school. And I liked Hopewell Valley because it has a good academic background, good academic reputation. Again, that wasn't so good back then in the 60s, but when they got past it, it's got a pretty high ranking in the state, and that's one reason I stayed here. And my son over there went to Hopewell Valley, and one of the reasons we stayed around was because it was a good school system if you want to do college prep.
And I do want to just say this one thing. I had a couple special teachers in high school. I have to give a shout out. Mr. Lavero. I think there's some Laveros still in the area. And I'll never forget, he was, so back in the 60s, you know, you either, generally they kind of pushed you, women, into like secretarial, not even business, secretarial, some typing and shorthand and everything was very much thing. Some pushing to college clips. But I'll never forget Mr. Lavero said to me, it was one of those typing steno things, and he looked at me and says, you know, Susan, you are really going to need this. And I know what he was trying to tell me, that your skills are going to have to be better and top. You're going to have to push yourself a little hard. So I give a shout out to Mr. Mike Rivera. Ron.
Well, my father also attended school here, as well as myself. And it gave me a flashback of a story that he told. My father was an athlete. He enjoyed football, baseball, whatever else. And he shared this story with us, which was kind of funny about it. He was small of stature, but he did manage to get on the football team. And he tells about how my grandmother, she saw him coming home in his uniform, and his trousers were hanging off and his shirt was like way oversized, and how she laughed for about an hour because of the stuff that he had on. But when I got lost in here and I was supposed to find the media room, I didn't know this room was this size. This used to be, I think, a soccer field. I was totally shocked when I came up the hall and saw this big room here. And I enjoy going through the school and recognizing parts that where the old auditorium used to be. And I remember the ramp going down to the first floor. And that's about all I remember.
I remember that ramp.
And we had a class of, I think, 129. And now I see in the auditorium, there's like 1,000 or so chairs there. And we all knew each other. If someone came from another school, they were a new student, they just moved here, the whole school knew this person was new. That's how close we were. We were like one big family, not I'm sure people here see people and they think they're strangers, but they've been here all along.
There's so many of us.
Yeah. I know. Listen, I know Nana has some. I already told her to behave.
Board of Education. I have, about the school system, when my children were going to school, all of them went to the Hopewell Elementary School in Hopewell. But when they were getting ready to go to high school, the borough and I guess it was everybody was a little. Didn't want my children to go to Princeton to high school. So in the meantime, the borough and I guess the township was getting ready to build the high school. And so we won the vote to get the high school by 2. And I'm going to tell you, I was there at every single solitary meeting because I did not want my children to go into Princeton to school because you had to pay for them to go. And that did not make sense to me. But anyway, all 10 of my children went to the elementary school in Hopewell and also in the schools here in Pennington. And I have to say that I am very proud that I fought for it. And I don't think you want to hear about the way I fought for my children in high school.
Yeah, because in the office they said, oh no, here comes Mrs. Brooks again.
The idea was what I did for my children in the area. When school closed in June, it began at home for the children. Consequently, my children, unfortunately or fortunately, knew more than some of the teachers they had at the school at that time. And I was at every single meeting they had at night like that to fight for my children's I don't know what to say, but anyway, to fight for them. In one thing, the teacher had asked one of their children in their class to write what they did over the Christmas holiday. Well, because we were a family, the older children went out and shoveled snow to earn money to help buy the younger children Christmas presents. So consequently, when that went back to the school and the child wrote down what it was, the teacher said she was lying, that they didn't do things like that. So guess what I did? I went down there and I told that teacher that my children didn't lie and that she needed to change her attitude. So consequently, everybody in that school knew me. Another time, my oldest son and another young man were knitting socks in study hall, being quiet. The teacher gave them detention because they weren't studying, quote unquote. Now, would you rather have a child knitting in your class or up there acting like a fool? So consequently, I told her about herself. Another time, my son took a book to school to read. I said to him he could have that book to read. The teacher took it away from him and said it wasn't proper for him to read. But when I went to get the book from her, she didn't have it for me. She didn't return it. So evidently she enjoyed it. But I have to say that everything that happened in the school when when something good happened, I would always go down and tell the school so the school could get the credit. So consequently, when my daughter Winona and her brother joined the Air Force and took the test, they passed the test higher than anybody else. So consequently, I went back to the school and told the school so the school could be proud. So, and the other thing is that all down the line, everything that happened, I am happy that I helped them vote to get the high school.
I just wanted to piggyback on Ron's things. I wanted to shout out to his dad,
Yes.
Dick Clark. He was on the school board.
Yes, he was. He was the first African American on the school board.
And he was also part of the Juvenile Justice Committee, too. So a shout out. He did quite a few things for the committee. That was one.
He was also inducted into the Hopewell Valley Hall of Fame because he lettered in like, I don't even know how many sports.
Oh.
And what was the EO?
AEO.
AEO.
That was big. Let me tell you
My
about the AEO.
sisters,
They
my
were. go
sisters
ahead, I'm
were
sorry.
gonna get me if I didn't mention things that my father did. I was in the military when he became like a social activist. The name of the group was, well, they got a few friends together and they started this association called AEO. It was, the initials mean Association for Equal Opportunity. And what they did was they acquired a house on South Main Street, Pennington, and they refurbished it. It was like, what's the name of the
Habitat.
Habitat for Humanity?
Humanity.
Humanity.
Yeah.
It was the same type thing. And they refurbished this house and they gave it to a woman who had, a single woman with children with no expense. And I also remember them going in Trenton and fixing up some houses. I remember being on a ladder painting sometimes. And he also, I remember being with him when he put sod in the baseball field of the Little League in Hopewell.
The one
I
off the
remember him
31.
doing that.
One that's back.
He also was a founding member of the Babe Ruth League, and he coached a team with Beverly's father, who's 4 years younger than my father. Coached a team, and they won the pennant for 3 years in a row, Lamson and Needy Forest. One of my classmates happened to be on his team, and I remember the classmate. He didn't have self-esteem or confidence, and he once shared with me, this made me so proud. He said that when he was on my father's baseball team, he says he gained confidence and boosted his self-esteem. He said he wouldn't be the same man that he was if he hadn't been on that baseball team. Made my chest want to bust.
Kathy, if I could
Yes.
just say, elaborate on the AEO house, and anybody can correct me. I think it was 64, 65. There was a principal here, Mr. Rasidi, and his methods were questionable. And out of that was partial. Many things out of that. They decide this group of your dad and your mom had held many meetings, but you have to understand, at that time, they were holding meetings there, and they were bombing churches in the South. And they were holding meetings regarding equal opportunity. They wanted to bring this, rehab this home so that a person of color would have the opportunity long before affordable housing. And so out of that, that's how that kind of started. I mean, there probably were many, we were just kids, so there was probably many other reasons that we didn't even realize. But I remember very much that type of thing. They were holding those meetings, and, there could have been some pushback that we didn't know about. Your dad was working in town. He was working for House Nursery, and that's long been, I don't know if anybody here remembers the Plant Market, House Nursery on Main Street, and, there could have been some pushback about that was kept from us. You were in the service, you were on
I just was gonna say really quickly that my brother, my daughter, and I all received scholarships from AEO.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we all received. That was one of the few scholarships that I was actually considered for, so.
The one thing that Mom is left out that I think is very, very important, from one of the fights that she had with the school system here, the high school. When I signed up for college prep courses, and they called me down to the office and said to me that I couldn't take college prep courses. What are you going to do with that? You need to take, typing.
Right.
And I went home and told Mom. Mom was there. Mom came in there, and she said, and this actually gave me, some help when my son went to school, but I told Mommy, and she came in, she wants to take a college prep course. You let her take college prep. Do you understand? She like a finger in the face. And I didn't, and they kept trying to make me sign up for other stuff before Mom came in. And I said, no, this is what I want. And so she came, and because of her, because they were saying that no black student had taken college prep courses yet, and that you're not capable of it and you cannot do it. Oh. She came down to the school. I got to take the college prep courses.
There were many stories that I know your sister Karen went through that, But then there were other good stories. Your sister Judy was the class president. What was that? 62, 63? 62. She was class president.
Also, first cheerleader.
Yeah, she was the first cheerleader after, someone said there would never be one, but yes, she was.
And my brother
Yeah,
spent,
everybody remembers her.
I came from elementary school as a
my
cheerleader.
brother spent his last 2 years in high school at Pennington Prep School. He was sponsored by, I think, my father's employer, or he had won scholarships, but he was also the class president.
Right.
He was voted most likely to succeed. He was the captain of the football team, most likely to succeed and best all-around athlete.
That would be Richard. Yeah.
In his senior year, or?
Yeah. Then he went on to Cornell University, and even though he was the best football player there, he was fourth string at Cornell.
And also Cornell didn't want him playing football. Remember, he
Because
was
of
doing the baseball.
injuries, he finally worked his way up to first string, and the game was between Cornell and Princeton. And they were scrimmaging, and it was a big deal, like, you can come home, all is going to come to the game, and the family, it's right here in Princeton, so it's local. And it's a local boy coming back home and playing football. Well, during scrimmaging, he was a jumper in football. He would jump over. Well, he jumped over and he folded his leg under and he popped his knee. So that was the end of his football career.
Wow.
I want to say one thing about the high school back in the 60s and the 70s. The teachers weren't thoughtful enough for me. I don't know whether it was the Board of Education or just the teachers themselves, but a lot of them looked at you and figured you weren't able to do what you were supposed to do. And so therefore, that's why I fought so hard for my children because when I went to school back in the 30s, believe it or not, we weren't allowed, people of color weren't allowed to take college courses at all. You had to take a business course. Well, if you took a business course, what business was going to hire you? You ended up doing housework. But I was fortunate enough to be raised by a person who taught me that I could do anything I wanted to do. And consequently, when I graduated from Tuckahoe High School in 1939, I graduated with a college, off of a college course. And I was one of the very few people that did that. I also broke the color barrier in my school band. I played trumpet, and I marched in every parade they had. I played in all of the concerts. I even played for my own graduation. But I mean, these were the things that I taught my children, that they could do anything that they were able to do. And I know I'm 102, but to this day, I still believe that anybody can do anything that they want to do. They just have to get out there and do it. My motto for myself is, if you don't do, you won't do. So therefore, do it. And that's the way I am. If you don't like it,
So,
This is her dance.
there's,
This is
Mom.
her dance when she points her finger at her.
I can do that too. If I can do it, you can do it. You too. Don't look at me like that. I'll make you do it.
so lots of community building around school, but I know that there are other ways that the Black families in this area built community. And I know, Ms. Ronnie and I, we talked about this a little bit. The Black church was really integral in solidifying community for families. And so I know, like, everyone here came up in the church. And I'm sure you have stories that you want to share about that.
You want me to start?
Go ahead.
So, my grandparents in Pennington Borough, my grandmother, she attended Bethlehem Church right there on South Main Street. The little white church there used to be next to the house nursery. A lot of good times growing up in that church. Small, miney, large Sunday school, a lot of church picnics. One I remember going to Comfort Park, I don't know if you remember, for a church picnic. Ice skating at Dr. Abe. Even though I lived in Hopewell, I really didn't ice skate at Rockwell. Used to be Doc Abe. What is it now? It's House. What is that thing?
How common.
How Common.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what it is.
Okay.
And it used to be a pond there, and we used to ice skate there, and that was a lot of fun. Dyke's Dutch Treat. Anybody remember Dyke's Dutch Treat? So it wasn't one of those where we were welcome to sit down and have lunch, but after Sunday school, we would walk up there. There wouldn't be anybody around, so we'd go up there and have our pizza burgers or whatever. So yeah, that was Dutch. There's a lot of good times growing up in the church, a lot of plays and different things, and so we enjoyed that.
I heard about the chicken and waffles.
Oh, the chicken and
So
waffles.
I'm just saying, I missed out on all that action.
Good, yeah. Chicken waffles were famous. Yeah, they were famous. Yeah, so it was a lot of good times. Go ahead.
When I was elected to do this project, a lot of good memories rolled up, and a lot of them were based on the church, which was just stated. if you didn't see your friends during the week, usually you'd see them on Sunday, like in Sunday school. Church was a good bonding experience in the black community. And Easter time, kids from all over the community would get a piece that they were supposed to say.
Oh, yeah.
Then we'd have a program and the children would go up on stage and they recite their piece. Sometimes it was short and for the older kids it might be a little longer. Christmas time, I remember having a play, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus in the manger. And probably the most thing that points out most is Sunday school picnics.
Mhm.
Every year during the summer, we would elect to go somewhere on a Sunday school picnic like Rockaway Beach, Willow Grove, Coney Island, Palisades Park.
Yeah,
And the whole black community would be on,
that's
like
so true.
2, maybe 3 buses sometimes. And they'd all go, and great bonding experience. Some of the older kids would start singing and we'd sing, and it was, you'd take your lunches and stuff. It was a great warm experience. I was always the last one on the bus. They used to have to send men out to try to find me because I'd be out trying to get on the ride.
It was great, yeah.
Church was a great experience. Tack on to that, hitchhike off of that. Also, baseball. Baseball was a big
It was
thing.
huge.
Baseball didn't cost much, like for the equipment. Once you got the equipment, you could play. We played at Hopewell Elementary School. Used to have baseball diamond. I remember one up towards New Brunswick, one out towards Skillman. I think even one on Bear Tavern Road. I remember one there, a baseball diamond there. But we bring our snacks and drinks and stuff and have a baseball game, especially on the 4th of July. I remember 4th of July up at Hopewell Elementary School. And Pennington had a team called Parker's Giants. Parker's Bar and Grill used to be where the ShopRite is now.
Oh, wow.
They had a grill on one side and the bar on the right side. And most of male blacks on the way home, they would stop at Parker's and have a beer. I remember sitting in the car for 15 minutes. Had a beer. And the baseball game would be on, and there was an announcer called Mel Allen.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was sponsored by Ballantine Beer, 3 big Ballantine beer. I don't even think they sell it now, but Parker sponsored the team, and there was a team in Hopewell called the Raiders. Some of them had shirts, some of them didn't have pants. It was like a tattered group of people that got together and had a baseball game, and it was big fun.
I can, I just want to elaborate on what Ron said about the Sunday school. Well, first of all, Parker, I think it was a trailer. Was it a trailer?
Yeah.
And it kind of sat. Yeah, it looked like a diner kind of sat. Yeah, and sitting in the car, that was their idea of childcare. I remember that. Really? And, but I wanted to elaborate on the Sunday school picnics because they were a lot of fun. It was like once a year. But I also remember we could swim, and correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, swim at Belmar, but we couldn't go on the boardwalk at Belmar. We got back on the bus to go to the boardwalk at Asbury Park. You couldn't swim at Asbury Park. You could swim at Belmar. And I don't know if they had a boardwalk or we couldn't go on the boardwalk, but we had to get back on the bus and go to Asbury Park to get on the boardwalk. But I remember that because I just didn't understand what's up.
And that's a huge part of history that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't know.
Right.
Is that even, even the Atlantic Ocean was regulated.
Yeah.
And there was, if you ever heard of Chicken Bone Beach,
Shout out.
it's one of the first places that, Black people were ever allowed to swim in the ocean. And it's called Chicken Bone Beach because, right, traveling wasn't safe
That's right.
for Black people. And so they packed
'Cause you
their
couldn't stop.
food, and fried chicken is one of the most potable things, right? It's easy to taste.
Tasty
And,
inside.
so that's what you were eating on the beach. Hence was Chicken Bone
Right.
Beach.
Right.
I do want to give a little bit of time to allow audience members to ask questions
Absolutely.
if they have.
Quick question, how much time do we have?
We have a couple more minutes. and
Okay, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
To have audience questions, I just wanted to say something before we wrap up.
Sure. Okay.
You want me to go?
You want to just say it at the end, or you want to say no?
Let's start with the audience questions, and I'll say it.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Anyone? Well, this might be easier than we thought.
Yes, is in the back?
I'm going to ask you actually to come up here. I'm going to turn this towards you.
Oh, no,
No, you can do it, or else we won't hear your question on the recording.
Yeah, that's right.
This is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. So one of you mentioned that there were many more African-American families in the past. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on that and tell
Sure.
us a little more about what the community was like as compared to, what it is now?
Sure, I know Ron and I know Beth can probably talk more about it, they were older, but go ahead.
Or I could say a couple words and
Yes,
then other
please.
people. Yeah, so I think it gets a little bit complicated, but I believe that once you get back into the 19th century, there were just a lot of African Americans in the area. And it's a complex answer, and other people need to chime in. But I do know that there was a peach blight, like let's say back in the late 1800s. A lot of the agriculture, that sector of the economy where they were making a livelihood, kind of dried up for a lot of people. I think there was also gentrification in the Hopewell Valley area.
Yep.
Again, other people can chime in, but I think that there's probably a multi-factor, multi-level answer to why there are less African Americans now than there were 100 years ago.
It also comes down to the kinds of jobs that were available, because, the higher earning jobs were not available to Black people. And so when there was less industry here, there was less opportunity. And then when there was a sort of a shift in the railroad, I think also, the Gandhi dancers, those were, Uncle Alexander was a Gandhi dancer, which is folks who take care for the tracks, the tracks between Hopewell and Skillman. But when, some of this industry moved away, which was labor,
Right.
which is really what they felt we were able to do, the families had to go where they could find work. And so you saw a lot of families going to what is now Ewing and
Right.
Trenton and Lawrenceville. So you'll hear the names repeated. Beverly's a Smith. We know that there's a Smith family. That's a large family in Trenton. And then and even portions of families went, and some portions.
And I
stayed.
think too, Kathy, real estate had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. She's going to get me because they're
Right.
supposed to be off duty, and but they should have never told me they were coming. Come on. A lot of you know the fabulous Beverly Mills and Lee Buck, founders of Stoutsburg, tremendous mentors to me and others. Come on in here.
I call her
You were
daughter.
going to say, yes, she does.
Well, I was going to say that the African American community, especially on Main Street, was all black. From Curlis, which is down where the plant market used to be, all the way up to Lanning, practically on both sides. I think I'm talking about Hopewell. Come here. That actually started in the 1800s. And my fourth great-grandfather, Samuel Blackwell, was very instrumental in the homes that were built to support the AME Church. So he was a friend, spiritual, I guess, friend of the Methodist Church. Joshua?
It was Jonathan Bunn.
Jonathan Bunn, yeah, she corrects me. Jonathan Bunn, who came from the family that started the Methodist Church in Pennington. So in the AME Church, the land that the AME Church sits upon was donated by the Bunn family. So being a friend of the Bunn family, Samuel Blackwell said, okay, we're going to build the AME Church on this land. And they built it in 1847. So the houses that surrounded the AME Church started to spring up, my house being one of them. So from about 4 or 5 initial homes, other black homes started to grow. And that's how we got black community in Pennington.
And that's similar to how Crawley Avenue was born.
Exactly.
Because of the church, the plant of
Exactly.
First Baptist.
Now, understand, we were contained there. If you were to try to buy a home outside of that area, you would have a problem. You were not welcome.
Home you live in.
There was tried the house where I now live. Mr. the English teacher.
Oh, yeah.
McNair, Mr. McNair, Vance McNair.
Wesley McNair.
So he was my teacher in the middle school, and Mr. Sheets, Dick Sheets, who passed away recently, who was a former principal at Bear Tavern, spoke to him. They were very good friends, and he said to him, listen, you know, you're commuting from Lawrence to the school. Why don't you buy, you know, here? It's not that far, but like, why don't you buy here? So he thought that was a good idea. He went, I'm not going to say the name of the agency. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Because I'm looking at you. So he went to a realtor, and he knew that that home was for sale, and asked if he could see it, and was told that they would not sell him that home. And before he passed away, Mr. Sheets was able to let him know that I was living in the house. So that was, that's a win, right? And my mom also lives up in Ralston Manor, so that's another win.
This is your program. We're going to sit down. But I wanted to say one other thing about the climate of Pennington and the region. You'll read about it in the next book, which will be out next July. Not much different than a small southern town, to tell you the truth. The black ladies did housework for the white ladies in town. My mother was one of them. I can remember before I was old enough to go to school, I would go with my mother while she cleaned houses. And my Aunt Marvel, our Aunt Marvel, who was an absolutely brilliant student, had all kinds of honors. She wasn't supposed to live to the age of 10, but she lived to be 100. And she tells a story about a white lady coming to school and asking the office to bring her the colored girls so she could choose someone to come do her housework. So they rounded up.
Slave market.
They rounded up
The color girls.
the colored girls, and I believe she was like 13 or 14 at the time, and paraded in front of this woman, and she chose my Aunt Marvel. And she would leave school and go to this woman's housework and make her dinner and do her homework and go home and finish what she had to do and graduated with honors. I'll leave you with that.
Yes.
I just can't leave. Oh, thanks a lot. I just can't leave all this wisdom and history
history, without asking the question about war in the 60s, you know, when things were roiling everywhere, and I think back to like the riots in Newark in '67. I was in North Jersey at the time, and being near Newark was insane, but down here, like, I can imagine how it would have been in Trenton, but how was it being a kid in Hopewell, or a young person in Hopewell then?
Well, you're talking about in the 60s. So
67, 68.
Right, so I graduated in 68. So as you can imagine, there was less than 200 in class. It was very sheltered. And you know, our parents were, you know, very involved with King, and of course we love Cassius Clay, and we love so many more of the activists, but it was very sheltered. A lot was going on in Trenton. But I did have this one memory of our senior class trip, and in Washington. And the first memory is that we were in a segregated hotel, and I remember all of us. Bevis was in class with us, 4 girls. We had to be together, which was fine, but it was segregated because we were below the Mason-Dixon line. And Reverend King was killed while we were there. Yeah, and remember, we were on the bus, and I remember they hustled us out. They made a huge announcement. We were at the zoo. They made a huge announcement, get back on the bus. We were supposed to go into Trenton to get picked up. Switch that around. We're going to go. You're going to go into Princeton to get picked up. And literally, as we're leaving D.C. on the bus, we could see the smoke rising. That's how fast we were getting out of there. And but the climate here was, and I hope other people will speak to it. To me, it was like, I don't know if anybody remembers like where you were when what's his name, O.J. Simpson. It was quiet. It was like it was like you're not going to speak about it. And I noticed so much of Hopewell Valley is like this. You have this sheltered area, and so much, and of course so much has changed, but it was almost sheltered from that. You know, you're not to do that. That's not happening here. We're not going to let it happen here, and nothing will change here, which is why so many of us moved. And I think as you got further along in the years, why less and less people of color were here, not only priced out, well, very much so, but not only there was no industry, there was no real estate for them to move to. So that was my feeling of the climate at that time. I'm sure some other people, if anybody else want to speak on that.
I was in South Dakota.
Wow, good place to be.
Yeah, I think the more as a community that we move away from this idea that we are exempt
Right.
from the problems that
Right.
everyone else in this country is facing, I think the better off we'll be. I'm hoping to see more of that. Rob, I think this is going to be the last question. Oh no, we got 2 more. I see 2 hands. So Rob and then Ellen.
I've heard Mr. Ronnie talk about the farm on Dublin, and I think I read about Susan write about her dad as a farmer, and
Yeah.
you know, the brooks up on Mountain Church.
Right.
Could you say something about maybe something that you miss about being on the land like that, and something that you wish for your descendants with
question.
respect to the land?
Great question, Anne.
I guess my comment, I'm still on the land, believe it or not, I'm still,
Yes, you are.
our family has been in that house since the mid-19th century. It's like, we're aboriginal, and it's fine, I love it. But I would like to have other people that are interested in agriculture to come help me, come talk to me. I mean, I'm not just saying about weeding, but I would love to, touch base and connect with people that are into the agricultural traditions, and let's work together. And I know that there's stuff going on in Hopewell around that. I'd love to tap into it.
I just want to say that, and I'm so thankful that you brought that up. My father would have loved you for that. He loved the land, he loved the farm, and actually, when they moved in, I think you could speak better to me, the woods behind our house came right behind the house, and each year he took it back. But he had, even growing up in Pennington Borough, he loved He loved Pennington, but he loved being up on the hill and the farm. And I'm so glad you brought up about Dublin Road. Talk about picnics. There were two uncles, his dad and my mother married his dad's brother. So two, right there, 50 and 51, Dublin Road. Both of them had a pile of kids. Then more kids came, and a lot of picnics. He had a big garden. Uncle Fred had a big garden. And just want to thank you so much for that question and allow us to talk about it. Does your Dan have something?
Yeah. If you want to talk about land, in 1948, we moved up on the mountain, and we were able to acquire 28 acres of ground. And to this day, I am still living on part of that land that we had. But we had a struggle getting that land. I was living where Angela now lives. We had 7 children, and because her parents were getting married, and her mother was hanging drapes on my window telling me to get out, we had to move.
She wanted to be with her man.
And that was her polite way of saying that I'm married and we have to move in. So anyway, on an Easter Sunday, a gentleman named, I can't think of his name right now, but he knocked on the door and said, I understand you're looking for a house. And I said, yes. And he took me up on the Mountain Church Road and showed us the house that the bank and the realtor had told us that we couldn't have. But he said, it's my house, you can have it, and I'll hold the mortgage. So we moved in on a Sunday. And that was in 1948. The year taxes on that land was $50. And we still have part of that land. But it was hard back then because a lot of places you wanted to move, you couldn't move. And it wasn't because you couldn't afford it. It was because of the color of your skin. And a lot of people, it bothers me to this day that the color of your skin is what stops you from getting what you deserve. Now, I was fussing with my children the other day, this is off the subject, because they say black and white. Now, in your mind, have you ever seen a black person? No, they're brown or dark brown. Have you ever seen a white person? No, they have a color. So to me, it's people of color, this world, not black and white. Now, if I'm wrong, God forgive me. But if I'm not, that's the way I'm saying. So every time I see one of those signs that say black people's matter, I want to go tear it up because all people matter.
You shouldn't come to my house, Mary. You might not want to come to my house
And that's my sermon for tomorrow.
because I have those signs everywhere.
Now what?
I said, you might not want to come to my house because I have those signs everywhere. I might get a tattoo. But she still loves me.
I still love you.
This has been really special and really precious to hear these stories. And I guess if there was one thing that you could leave us with, you know, when you think about some of the changes we've seen in Hopewell Valley that you've seen, if there's one thing that you could leave us with to take one action to continue your vision of Hopewell Valley, what would that one thing be?
Love.
What's your, do you have one thing?
Go ahead. Let's say action.
Yeah. What about you, Susan?
She
I would say, maybe, look behind your own backyard, look at different things.
Look in the mirror.
Well, we all could do that, yeah, look in the mirror, but, look at something a little different than where you came from or where you're at, or just something, look at something different people, different place. Kind of helps open eyes. Hey?
What about you, Ms. Ron?
Well, I wanted to expound on Rob's question.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Who's my neighbor that we like? From 1910 to 1970, there was something called the Great Migration, where blacks moved from the south to the north. Prior to that, 90% of blacks lived in the south in 1910. And then in 1970, it had been about 50-50, like 50% in the north, 50%. Well, my grandparents were 10 years ahead of that. My grandmother went to New York to work with families. She migrated from Virginia, went to New York and worked in a family. Then somehow she ended up in Pennington, and my grandfather followed her here. They were from Gretna and Chatham, Virginia, and prior to that, my grandfather's family was from a place called Collins, Virginia. Well, they ended up in Pennington, and my grandfather found employment here. At one point, he worked on a railroad, which is hard work. And it was just like special kinds of people would work in the hot sun like that and toil like that. My grandfather was one of them. He would, I remember him digging ditches by hand, 3 foot deep and maybe 40, 50 feet long. I remember seeing him down in a hole digging a cesspool about 8 foot wide, and he was over his head and digging that out by hand. He was a hard worker. He knew how to castrate mules. He knew how to raise pigs and gardens, and he could slaughter hogs. He knew how to make wine and process meats. And we had a smokehouse. He knew how to process meats. He was like a jack of all trades. At that time in Pennington, this is Pennington history, there was a man called Percival Sked, or Percy for short.
Sked, yeah.
Percy owned real estate in Pennington. He owned property in Pennington. He was like a well-known businessman. It's like if there was a business, more than likely Percy Sked was involved with it. Well, I guess my grandfather asked him to buy property on Dublin Road, 3.5 acres. And because he was a good worker, I think Percy didn't want to get rid of him or let him move somewhere else. So if he bought property, he would stay here. And that's how we first got property on Dublin Road. In 1950, just before I turned 7, we moved across the road, and we got 4.5 acres. And I saw on some records that my father paid, I think, $150 then.
Wow.
On property now. But that's the history of my grandparents. And they also had 10 children, my grandfather and grandmother. They also had 10 children. And one of them was my uncle, my father's brother. My uncle, his name was Gator. Gator had a propensity to mix things together and make porcelain. So this was like a talent that he had that nobody else had. So he was well paid. And Uncle Gator had he was well known around because he had bought a Chrysler, a big Chrysler. There were, if you've seen the red fire engine in the Hopewell Pennington Parade, the old red fire engine, that's about the size of. And the other brothers had to chip together and they bought a Ford, which they all used together. But that's thanks for asking, Rob. That's the history of my.
What's the one thing that you would, the one action, like Ellen asked, to continue to improve things?
Oh, okay. I'd like to go back to the old ways where everybody knew everybody else. I remember we had 2 dogs, and when we took off to Pennington in the car, the dogs would follow us down the road, but they'd only go maybe 300 yards and stop, and then they'd go back home. Well, on one occasion, the dog just kept running, and they ran like 3 miles into town, and they were gone for like 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then finally somebody called us up on the other side of town, almost to Stony Brook. And they knew who our dogs were, who owned them. That was the old Pennington. When I was in grammar school, I had classmates, his dog would come like 5 or 6 blocks away. Just come, he knew when to come when the kids were playing. And we knew the dog's name, Blaze. We knew my friend Dennis's dog's name. I forget it now. But we knew the names. Like, people were closer then. We used to play football on Main and Delaware Avenue on Sunday afternoon. Hey man, hold up, here comes a car. And I enjoyed that. Like, everybody knew everybody else. We could go down the street and we could see names on the mailbox and we knew those people.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Angie?
So, I'm sorry, I just know you're going to end this, and I feel like I needed to get my point. So anyhow, I did want to say something about Albert Witcher. He touched so many parts of this community, and he had quite a legacy here, just as we mentioned Dick Clark before, and I just didn't really want to end this without kind of pointing it out. I think you touched on it when about the role of the churches. Bethel AME actually had a cemetery that now we call the Pennington African Cemetery. You probably are familiar with it by that name, where blacks were segregated, blacks could only live in certain areas, blacks had to be buried in certain areas. And that cemetery was, in many respects, kind of forgotten about after a certain point in time when segregation was no longer popular. But he was one of the people that actually was a pallbearer for people that are actually buried there. And he, like so many other people here, have ancestors that are buried there. So him, and not just him, many other group of people, I should mention the Boyers, the Kings, there are many other families that came together when development threatened to just basically have a new McMansion, laid right on top of the cemetery. So I do want to give a shout out to all those people. There's the Stoutsburg Cemetery Association, all these small organizations that are looking at black history and black community all through the years, even when it wasn't particularly popular. And also want to mention individual accomplishments in terms of the fact that many of these men, as mentioned, Lonnie was mentioning our grandfather on our maternal side also worked on the railroad. Many of these men and women put in many, many, many hours of work. A lot of times we didn't even see our parents a whole lot during the week if they put in all those hours and had to commute far away just to get a job. They weren't always able to do clubs and organizations like that, but they were able to take their time and make sure that they moved the community along, and also were accomplished in their own right in their careers. One of the things that we talked about is what are we proud of? And I'm also proud of the real estate investments that our parents and grandparents made, the investments they put into their children, time, money, whatever it takes to keep moving our community forward, and also investments they put into themselves. My father started off as a mechanic. He became a salesman, a manager. He got accounts with Frito-Lay. He got accounts with UPS. He didn't have an inheritance. He only had a high school education. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of fathers and mothers out here that we can talk about. I'm not trying to brag on them, but I do want to point out that even back in those times, people pushed forward and people accomplished. I just wanted to make sure that was on record.
And I just want to First Baptist.
Listen, I should have told you how this was going to be.
I just wanted to bring up, since they talked about Bethel First Baptist, that came up with Reverend Crawley. Did you want to mention that?
Oh.
Just real
I
quick.
think
That's how Crawley Avenue.
It was briefly mentioned.
Yeah.
Exactly
Was it?
right.
That's
I'm
how
sorry.
Crawley
Yes.
Avenue.
I wasn't
Basic, that
listening.
land was purchased, where First Baptist
The
sits. It was
founders.
subdivided, the
Yes.
founders, it was subdivided and family homes were created there. That is the only street currently in Hopewell Valley that is named after a person of color, but that is soon to change. That is soon to change with a new construction that everybody's mad about. Every street in that community is going to be named after a place or a person that is significant in the Black history of this community. And you can thank your former mayor, Courtney Peters Manning, those two gorgeous women in the back. The three of us got to be a part of that project, and so that is huge. Now we have to do, there's one thing I really want us to do. We're going to sing. We're going to sing. Is no one excited? To you, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nana. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, wait, we're gonna wait it.
For the past 3 years, you want to kill me.
So, as I said, she'll be 102 at the end of this month. And so, it was actually Mary Lou Ferrara, my dear friend, who was like, children don't do this. Who wanted to make sure that we celebrated you this moment. So I really want to say thank you to everyone that came here. This was sort of my last hurrah as a member of the board of the Hopewell Museum. When I accepted the role as president of SSAAM, I knew that I was going to have to let something go because, you know, there's a lot of important work to be done. Bob and I have been talking about some form of this program for years. I think since I joined the board of the Hopewell Museum, it sort of morphed into something a little different. But we felt it was an important conversation to have. I'm not on the panel, but one of the ways that I think we advance the needle when we want to have a conversation about a more equitable and just future for all of us, listen, the personal relationship, that is the answer. When this thing that you're maybe so afraid of suddenly has a heartbeat and a face that you know, and that you care about, I think it gives you the perspective you need, right? It gives you a greater level of understanding, and we realize at the core of it that there's so much we have in common as people. So that's my, I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but that's my advice. Get to know people. I mean, that's literally what they were talking about. It's exactly what they're talking about. Don't be afraid to learn about someone else's story. Don't be afraid to learn about other people's story. Keep that in our schools. Don't fight against that. It's important. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I guess that's it, folks. Yes. Oh, the pictures. Oh, Bethany Lane. These are Bethany Lane's pictures, actually, from the first book. So I'm going to use this one because that's Nana and Pop Pop, right? And I'm going to need help, right? Is this Mr. Which Hughes? I don't know which.
This is Charlie. Charlie Hughes.
That was Charlie Hughes.
Taxi service.
He had the And this is Uncle Earl, Mr. Earlius, right? And this is Queen Hester. And is that Mr. Cole, is that?
Mr.
And
Coleman.
they were receiving the Good Samaritan Award for Hopewell.
Yes. And this is Beth's dad. This is Beth's dad. So that's all. That's all these folks.
Yeah, you do it.
Get snacks.
Anybody that-
Thank you, thank you, thank you.